Welcome, welcome, 1, 2, 3. Hello, guys. Welcome, welcome, welcome in. We're continuing to highlight what's happening here at this hour as we talk about the significant snowfall into the region and still have updates for you here. And I'm going to let a few more people join. And I always check to see, make sure everybody can hear me. So that's the first and foremost thing. And you're probably going to hear a little feedback. Good. Okay. Got it on my phone here. That's the first thing. And we always try to let everybody see, everybody join us, because I know that typically what's going on is we're sitting here and, you know, kind of give an update. I want to make sure everybody joins here along, because we kind of have an update for you here. As promised here, just after 9:15, closer to 9:30, getting some ducks in a row. So I can see your guys' comments on here as they go along. I'm going to go through the whole thing and the timeline. And, you know, the short of it, as we continue to focus on the cold air, I'm going to let a few more people join there as well. And I'm also going to pull this up on the text line, which I'll pull down here shortly, so you guys can text in as well, 314-425-5355, as we continue to be talking about that as well. More people are joining. Welcome. I usually let a few more people join for another 30 seconds or go, and then we'll kind of get into it. Temperatures are very cold, so I'm not going to say too much here at this point, except for the fact that it's getting colder throughout the day, right? So now let's get into it now that more people are starting to join as they're clicking on the link that we sent you here on the 5 on Your Side app. Temperatures are very cold outside right now. You see these temperatures up somewhere between 5 to 10 degrees, right? It's very cold outside. I want to pull this back out because, to me, that's the most significant thing as we're looking at the big picture. You'll see me kind of thumb between this on here, back and forth, and I'll put this on a full screen as we talk about what's happening. Because look at how cold it is to the north. We're some 5 to 10 to upwards of 15 below, right? So as we have this significant cold air, what you're going to continue to notice is our temperatures are not going anywhere except down the rest of the day. The other thing that's important is look at the wind chills right now. We have 11 below. This is very cold air. This is the dangerous cold. And I know the first thing that jumps out at you is the snow, because we've talked about it and how it's ramped up as well. But the thing today is not snow. It's extreme cold that's starting to settle in. That's what we're looking at now. Wind chills are almost at 30 below, and even if I just kind of drag this here, I'll drag this here on this particular side of things as look at what's going on. We've got significant cold air, and I want to kind of drag this to the north. Look how cold it is to the north. You're talking about 30, 35 below. This area here where there's no color, that means it's past my contour. So that means it's 40 plus below wind chill. So yeah, that's the significant cold air. That's what we're seeing today. So our winter weather alerts, obviously the main story has been the fact that we continue to see a wide area of winter weather alerts that stretch all the way from New Mexico to Pennsylvania. It's some 1,700 miles worth of winter storm warnings, right? So that's the significant issue that we have. And even as I zoom in locally, you can see we're certainly a part of that, right? So you don't need to worry about that. Every county in our entire coverage area and pretty much region is under a winter storm warning. We talked about, as we increased the totals during this stream yesterday and talked about the potential for 8 to 10 inches of snow, and some people asked, where's the winter storm warning? You see why that it becomes more of a thing where people are questioning, well, why haven't we have one yet? All those weather services across this entire area have to coordinate those offices and make sure that everything looks good and everybody is on the same page in terms of the forecast, right? So it's not just our office, which does a great job, right? So that's one of the things that we point out as well. It's this storm system right about here. And as we still focus on where this is from a standpoint of the big picture, you continue to look at right about here. This is where the storm system is sitting right here, right? First and foremost, you'll see this moisture that's starting to stream up from the Gulf. That is entering this cold air, which is right here. We talked about a little bit. We talked about where this is in regards to what's going on. Here's the pointer. This is the leading edge of this colder air, and I'll pull this back out right here for a second. The leading edge of this cold air is right here, and you'll see a few snow showers out ahead of it. Let's call that wave number 1. We discussed this yesterday on this particular stream, and then we have wave number 2, which is behind it. This is the stronger of it, and if we're going to pick between the two parts of this system and spots that we're looking at, this one provides less snow early Saturday. This one provides the bulk of our accumulation on Sunday. two parts, one storm essentially merging, and that's what we're looking at. That's why it's important, and that's why I want to make sure that you are aware of this as we head into the weekend forecast, because it's definitely going to snow. We have no changes to the forecast for the most part, maybe some minimal things that I'm looking at, but I want to point out the fact that it is incredibly cold and our wind chills are very cold throughout the rest of the day. Temperatures are going to be very cold. Here's the way Saturday sets up. Let's put this on full screen so you guys can see and where Saturday sets up for you. Wind chills will be between 10 to 20 below zero early. Now the snow begins by 10 a.m. and we're going to see difficult travel by the afternoon. And that is the biggest problem that we're going to run into as we look ahead to what's going on, because it's going to be very difficult to travel anywhere. Saturday morning, you got to be somewhere. You want to maybe make a run out to the store, something, one last thing. You haven't had to be able to do it. It's going to be cold, but the roads are dry. You'll see a lot of salt trucks, things like that. The road crews will be ready and ready to help. But Saturday will start out dry, but travel becomes difficult by the afternoon. And what I point out, and I've showed this particular run of Futurecast, I'll get behind the nuts and bolts and show you what's going on and what we're looking at, some of the higher resolution data. But we're still focused on the fact that early on, 6:30, as I pull this back out here shortly so I can see some things, or so that you guys can see it just a little bit better. Let me spin this way so that I can kind of get, you guys can see the whole thing here. So we start off at 6:30, right? We're seeing temps right around 5 degrees. Still the same timeline, where initially that dry air starts to cut into this, where it looks like it's snowing at 8:30, 9 o'clock. This is not reaching the surface. This dry air is in place. And over the next few hours, we're going to watch more of that settle in by 11 o'clock. And I think it's pretty much snowing for everybody, especially on the Missouri side by 11 o'clock. Maybe not so much the Metro East. Flora, Salem, Vandalia, you may still be on the leading edge of where some of that's not reaching the surface. It's dry air primarily, as still works its way in. But I think by the afternoon and evening, it's all snowing for everybody. But one thing I pointed out earlier is the fact that watch this by the afternoon. You'll notice where this lighter snow and heavier snow is. There are pockets of heavier snow. Most of this is light, and I still think at this point we're going to see some heavier snow. And from a high resolution standpoint, you can look at some of this as well. But I want to keep scanning through this here for you, because I think this is probably where we're going to see a bit of a lull period as well to some degree. And I think you see this maybe better on some of our higher resolution models. And I'll pull that up for you and just kind of show you, because I think it gives us a better play. And I'm going to do this on a full screen so you guys can take a quick look at it while I just kind of thumb around. This is kind of an idea of what we have in regard to, the timing is about the same, but I want to show you one of the different models and why, why things may look a certain way for you Saturday morning as we have more of the snow that's on the way. Watch this particularly as we have, this has a pretty good look at where this dry air is settled in, and I'll pull this back out just a little bit so you can see, right? So this is where the dry air is. We have pockets of snow. Some of that reaches the surface. This is still 7:45. This is the most recent look at this particular model. Now by 10, 11, 12 o'clock, you'll see where it's snowing the most is still to the south. That's why the totals consistently have been and probably will be still higher to the south as we look into the afternoon. Then it becomes maybe a little bit more spotty at times as we look at that the rest of the day. Look at 2:30, 3 o'clock. There's still a pretty good wide area of snow. And I think I agree with this for the most part as well. But one thing that's important for Saturday, which I'm going to get to, and that's why I want to make this big point, because I know how people are and I know how the reaction times are going to be. And I think this has kind of been buried in the wayside a little bit. Look at the evening, 5, 6, 7 o'clock. That's why I'm going to pause this, and then I'm going to click another graphic so that you guys are understanding this, and then I'll keep going on Futurecast. Look how the snow is relatively spotty by 6 or 7 o'clock. This is the first time I've seen this particular model line up with what I've been thinking about, and so I think that's important because you're seeing spotty snow. At no point do I think it really quits snowing, but I think the intensity is starting to wane by 6 or 7 o'clock. I think that's important because what I know how people operate, especially after we've been talking about this at great length for days upon end, hours upon end, if it stops snowing, people are going to say, where's my foot of snow, right? I know that's exactly what you're going to do, and I understand. But here's what I want to point out. Saturday is dry early, snow by 10 a.m. We're only going to get about 1 to 3 inches of snow on Saturday. This is not the full day of snow. We called that system number 1, and I think that's important to note because to me, that is the most important thing, because as we look at Sunday, we have heavy snow early. We're going to get the bulk of our snow. That's system number 2 that brings in more of that moisture, and to me, that is the difference. We don't see as much moisture on Saturday. It's consistent, but there are pockets of snow. Sunday is the heaviest snow, and that's where you're maybe going to get 5 to 8 inches of snow, right? So to me, that is the travel day, especially Sunday morning, that I think we're going to see more of that. Overnight Saturday into Sunday, the bulk of the snow is going to continue to fall. So like I said, that's the number 1 thing that I wanted to point out, because as I get back to Futurecast for you, from that standpoint, that's what I think that we're not talking about enough or maybe discussing enough. So that's what I really wanted to note here as I get back to what I think Futurecast may look like. So this is another good look at the high resolution model. Still, once again, picking back and forth between where, yeah, we have some of these lighter pockets of snow here. And then as we head throughout the rest of the day, notice how the snow really picks back up, right? This is really starting to line up maybe a little bit better. This is why I think it's important to note exactly about this. Now look at the difference here. From the last snow where we had lighter colors, the shades are much, much darker. We're starting to see things by 1 or 2 o'clock where that snow really starts to pick up. And that's where the bulk of these snows, and you're going to start to see some of these snowfall rates really pick up. This is 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, most people are on the roads, but the plows are going to try to catch up, and it's going to be difficult because it's snowing at such a rate that it is difficult. The other thing I want to notice just a little bit here as I move this to the south, and I'm going to point this out, and then I'll flip on something a little differently here. Look at this mix, and this is kind of a mix where you're seeing maybe some sleet mixed in, and it's very, very close to Fredericktown, Centerville, areas to the south where, in general, they should see the heaviest snowfall rates or pretty close to the higher snowfall totals, because I think they get a little bit more of Saturday snow. But one thing I want to point out are a couple of things in regards to snowfall ratios and why we're maybe seeing that even at those temperatures. And it all has to do with this entire system. And I want to point out a couple of things here. What you will see is this little nose of warm air, and I don't think that it's going to allow me to draw on this just a little bit the way I want to, but, and I can't put this exactly behind me, but what you'll see is the intersection of where that goes up to the right. That is that on that dotted line that's near 0, that's going to go from the bottom of the screen to the top. That's that typically, as we come back to this, typically what we see at this point is, you know, when you go up in the atmosphere, things get colder, right? So I'm going to pull this back out of myself just real quick here. When you go up in the atmosphere, it gets colder. That line should be going directly to the left. Well, it goes to the right because there's warm air above that. So I think that may undercut some of the snowfall totals ahead for us here, at least to the south. Not so much to the north, because I think we got a pretty good amount of snow that's going to continue to fall. And as I continue to spin this, you'll notice that eventually that pushes out of here. 7, 8 o'clock, it's still snowing. It's snowing heavily at 8 o'clock in the morning, and that trend continues outside as well. And then by midday, it starts to taper off. I think you're going to see most of that snow done by 1, 2, or 3 o'clock, right? So to me, that's where we are in regards to that. Now, let me pull up I mentioned some of these things because, like I said, I think we're getting the bulk of the snowfall. So I'm toggling back and forth here. I'm actually going to keep that on there. I liked where that is. And some of these runs aren't always as good, but that one I think is okay. I think we're going to keep that one here. So like I said, the bulk of the snowfall for me is going to be at that point. Let me pull the snowfall map up so I can talk to you guys about this just a little bit. Where the bulk of the snowfall is, to me, is going to be pretty much in the same spot, right? I don't think it's all that different. I'll pull this back out right here. I don't think it's all that different. I think you're looking at still the same from Troy to Pike County areas, north in Macoupin County, 6 to 8 inches. To me, the bulk of the area is in the 10 to 13 inch plus range. I think we're going to see a steady diet of that snow late Saturday into early Sunday. That's the heaviest period of snow that we have in the entire area. But as we look to the south, you'll notice that I did make a move from 8 to 12 inches. While I still think it is a significant winter storm and will be, you know, from a bullseye standpoint, there still is a fine line between how that goes up. But I do think that there is enough of a warm nose of air that may undercut not only that snowfall production, where we look at another thing, and I'm going to point this out as well, which I think I'm able to get on here as well. But you're also looking at from a snowfall production rate, but also that warm nose of air may start to work its way into some sleet. So that may bring the totals down just a little bit, and that's the difference from the forecast yesterday. And I'll put this on a model where you can see, notice how I go from a snowfall ratio when I mouse this to the north, which is about 20-1. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, which I can pull up, and I'll pull up for you in a second. You go from 20-1 here or so to the further south I go. Notice how it's 16, 15. There's a pretty good cutoff line to the south, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that that warm nose of air is coming in, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, maybe we're not talking about quite as much here as well. Like I said, from a pure snowfall standpoint, that's where we are in terms of the snowfall production. And just as a reminder from why we're getting that snowfall production here, why we're getting that here, and it really has to do with the temperature. And I'm going to pull this up for you here. Snowfall ratios go from wet. You know, this is. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but if you didn't join the stream, welcome. Let's talk about it a little bit again, especially as I just showed you that graphic here just a second ago. Where you're seeing here is on one side of things, we get 1 inch of water. And we're not going to get 1 inch of water, but it's come into play quite a bit. That would equal, if we get these wet snows where you get 5 inches of snow equals 1 inch of water. The snowfall ratios come down just a little bit and change. But as we get to 30, you know, around freezing or just a little below freezing, the standard, the metric for a lot of these models is about 10-1 snowfall ratio. When we get colder, it's 20-1. So that means 1 inch of water equals 20 inches of snow. And so finding that variable and then doing all that math and trying to calculate, that's why when we're figuring some of these things out, it's important. So that's why I wanted to show you that in regard to where we were in terms of where our snowfall map looked like, and maybe why it looks a little different here at this point as I put this back on here for you. You know, why it looks maybe a little different for you here. Because like I said, you're going to get a majority of this area is somewhere between 10 to 13 inches of snow. So 9:45 here. Let me try to look up here for some of the questions you guys have had. I'm going to start with Facebook today. I started with the text line yesterday. Let's see. A lot of people saying keep your pets inside. Laura says that. That's a good one. A lot of people got soup plans. Brian and Dan. That's a good idea. I think you're right on the money with that there. No problem. Let's see. You know, Scott said, translation, stay home. It's going to snow. Watch movies. And somebody said they wanted the snow for Christmas. So I totally understand what you're saying in that regard. So, yeah. So let's check in. I know we got some people that have asked a couple of things. And I honestly, this is one of the more cut and dry things where a lot of people are under that same type of, hey, it's going to snow just about the same amount for everybody. So exact questions are a little easier because you're not worried as much. Let's see. We've got, somebody asked 573-631, is it still looking like a dry, powdery snow? It is indeed. And, that's what we're going to continue to see. Joe said the snow to liquid ratio. So I'm glad that was informative for you. And that kind of goes with what we're seeing right now. The dry, powdery snow, it's cold. We have liquid variables that we've kind of watched, and now we know more about the storm. Not only it's being sampled locally, but we've kind of watched some of the models come into agreement where, we have between a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of liquid precipitation. And to me, that's the way I quantify what's going to happen on today because, when you look at this from a pure liquid standpoint, and I've kind of had this on the full screen for a little bit. Let me pull this up for you here. Saturday, 815-674, what time should we expect the snow to start being dangerous near Highland? I would expect that you're going to see, any snow will be dangerous on Saturday because as cold as it is, but I think you're going to see somewhere between upwards of 2 or 3 o'clock in Highland. So that's a good question there as well. Amber asks, should St. Louis be concerned for ice? There's no ice with this. This is all snow. We are going to get nothing but snow. This is all snow. Power outages, there are some minor power outages, but I'm not expecting them from a standpoint of, this is not a clinging to the trees type of snow. This is a brush type of snow. When it gets this cold, there are always power outages to some degree, but it is something that we monitor, and there's really no control over that. But I don't think it's going to be extensive power outages like there will be with ice in that regard. You know, like I said, let me pull this on full screen. I'll pull this back for you so you can look at that. And I'm going to turn it to the Saturday graphic because, like I said, I cannot stress enough that this weekend, the snow is not going to all fall at the same time on Saturday. I don't want you to be disappointed. I really don't want you to be disappointed because I know how this works, right? Everybody's going to say, where is my snow at? I thought we were going to get a ton of snow. We are not going to get a ton of snow on Saturday. That's just the bottom line. We are not going to get a ton of snow on a Saturday. It's going to take a minute for it to actually snow all that. And a lot of that is going to be really from the standpoint of, you know, when do we get that secondary wave of liquid? That's what I want to try to show you. I'm trying to pull it up here for you quickly, because I think it illustrates it maybe a little bit better here. So let's see if I can get this to work. I believe if I've got this just set to maybe the next 24 hours. So watch this liquid equivalent. Watch this on Saturday. I'm going to pull this up. I want you guys to pay attention to this because I think this maybe illustrates it. I've got this set up as futurecast rainfall totals, but I don't want you to take that at full salt because I'm going to change this to 3 p.m. This is how I want to illustrate this the best. I'm going to pull this out. Watch how, and I'm going to have to close this here in the next 2 minutes because the Show Me St. Louis is on very shortly. But I want to illustrate this the most in regards to the last graphic about rainfall totals. So I'm going to pull this out for me for a second. So as we're talking about this, from a pure liquid standpoint, right? This is not going to be liquid, but this is one way that we look at and try to convert using the snowfall ratios, 10 to 1, 20 to 1, whatever it may be. From a liquid standpoint, look at Saturday morning from 10 o'clock. Watch all the way as I scan this through 8 o'clock. This is only 1/10 of an inch of liquid, right? So we're not getting that much snow on Saturday. There's not that much liquid available. But watch the secondary storm. This is important. Watch where this goes. Watch how this all starts to crank up here, right? Now you're upwards of 1/2 inch of rain. And a lot of people always ask us these questions when it doesn't snow. Well, what if this were snow? How much snow would we get? Well, these are the equations that we're doing behind the scenes and trying to figure it out. Meteorologist Lance Blocker is looking at some of the latest data as well. He's with us. And so, like I said, from a standpoint of how much snow we're going to get, those are the things that we're looking at. And still, this, as a result, when I look at that, this is why we're doing all those calculations as we expect still a pretty good amount of snow, 10 to 13 inches plus, and whether or not we're going to get that warm nose of air or it's going to mix in with sleet and a very small portion of our southern areas. I think a lot of us are just getting some pretty good snowfall, and I'll leave you with this here, and I try to answer your questions behind the scenes. Like I said, it is dry early, and you can text us still because I'll be around. It is dry early, snow by 10 a.m., 1 to 3 inches of snow on Saturday. Do not be discouraged if you go outside in the evening and say, where's all this snow? I thought they were talking about a foot of snow. I know I'm going to get 15 of these comments at minimum. Sunday, it's heavy snow early. You're going to wake up and it's going to be a lot different. We got 5 to 8 inches of snow and maybe more, but it's done by 3 o'clock. And we got to be done now because Show Me St. Louis is coming up now. So I'm going to shut her down. You guys stay safe on the roads. We'll keep you posted throughout the rest of the morning.